Hello, 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 everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. Welcome back to the last section in Chapter 4, still reading Sacred Contracts, written by Carolyn Myss. Chapter 4 is titled Return of the Orphan. And this tells the tale of a story that you may be familiar with, either because you read the book or you saw the movie or both. But if you have not seen The Wizard of Oz, this is a spoiler alert because we're going to go over the symbolism of Dorothy's shadow aspects and archetypes that she must work through in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And I have to admit, I did read this in its entirety before I read it to you. I was interested in just kind of familiarizing myself with this last section. And I have seen this movie many, many times. I have not read the book, but I have seen the movie even recently. And I never, ever would have imagined what meaning there is behind it and how much there is to learn from it. So let's go ahead and get started. Return of the Orphan is what this is titled. We could probably reduce all our struggles with empowerment, such as those of Lucy and Maury, to our need to transform the abandoned, wounded, or dependent aspect of our child archetype to one that is healthy and self-sufficient. Because fairy tales and children's stories are such a rich source of insight into the innate courage and power that is contained within our archetypes, I find the clearest depiction of this transformation in the modern fable, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. In this well-known story, Dorothy has to seek out aspects of herself that she didn't know she had, including courage and intelligence well beyond those of the young orphan who left her Auntie Em back in Kansas. Seen as the archetypal adventure, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz presents the challenges of survival that we all face on our own yellow brick roads. In the book by L. Frank Baum, originally published in 1900, and the 1939 MGM movie starring Judy Garland, Dorothy is, like so many heroes of fairy tales and folk stories, literally the orphan child. Because she does not fit into the conventional tribe, her consciousness is her own to develop from the beginning. As the story opens, a cyclone is approaching. Really, it's a tornado, but it is a cyclone, but it's like the eye of the storm that's approaching if you've not seen the movie. Representing the chaos that is the classic precursor to transformation. As the cyclone looms menacingly, Dorothy runs to the storm cellar, trying to return to the tribe before the chaos. But they don't hear her trying to get in, and in effect, won't allow it. Dorothy runs back into the house with her beloved dog, Toto, whom she's holding on her bed as the cyclone lifts the house into the air. She bangs her head on the headboard, losing consciousness. In symbolic archetypal terms, a house represents the whole of the self, from the subconscious in the basement to the superego in the attic. The whole of Dorothy's life is lifted off in the chaos and begins to spin, to be symbolically reconstituted. Having to undertake the hero's journey, she has awakened her charism, the special grace that will see her through her ordeal of growth. Dorothy's journey takes her to Oz, where the house crashes down, and she says famously to Toto, "I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." I don't think she says it exactly like that. I think she says, "I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." Whatever. It's not verbatim, but I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. She begins to sense that she's been separated from her familiar environment, that what is going on is happening only to her, not to the tribe, and that she has to find within herself the strength and courage to endure what is coming. For the first time, she sees little munchkins, who represent fragments of herself. Like any hero, adventurer, or spiritual seeker starting on a journey of self-discovery, Dorothy asks questions. Where am I, and how do I get home? The munchkins tell her that she has to go to Oz, in essence, to go on a journey to an unknown destination. Dorothy's guardian for the journey is Toto, which is the Latin word for everything. Toto is an extension of Dorothy. He is her intuition. Like Vasilisa's doll, if you remember the story we read about the little girl who was gifted a doll before her mother died, and that was her guide. It was a tiny little doll that she kept in her pocket. So like Vasilisa's doll, and an archetypal image of a guardian. In shamanic terms, we would say that Toto is her spirit animal. Toto is also Dorothy's reminder that everything she needs is always with her if she'll just stay aware of what's going on. All spiritual traditions emphasize the need to keep your attention in the present time. As long as you remain present, everything you need is present with you. As soon as you project yourself back through the rest of your life, you begin to manifest a sense of vulnerability and insecurity characterized by fear of failure. Projection is the act of taking your present moment and stretching it across a lifetime, an impossible formula that will always leave you powerless. Then Dorothy meets the Munchkin leader, who represents the unified self emerging to give her direction. Even as you feel lost and ask, where am I? A part of your interior self immediately arises to give an answer. In Dorothy's case, the answer is to go to Oz. As she undertakes her hero's journey, the 4 archetypes of survival, which is child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur, enter the playing field. Dorothy's orphan child has been leading to this point. Her basic theme being, I'm a child, I've lost my way, I've got to get home. But the forces around her say, you're on your own, kid, and it's time for you to grow up. At this point in the film, although not in the original book, the 2 witches arrive on the scene, representing shadow and light. The Wicked Witch of the East says, I want your dog Toto, meaning that she wants to deprive Dorothy of her guardian. When the Wicked Witch goes after Toto in anger, Dorothy becomes frightened and her victim emerges. Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, holds off the Wicked Witch and gives Dorothy the famous ruby slippers. Those shoes represent another charism or grace that will see Dorothy through her journey to Oz. The book, which calls them silver shoes, makes it clear that Dorothy never takes them off. She is so comfortable with them that she even sleeps in them, making it difficult for the witch to get them away from her. When the Wicked Witch says, I want those ruby slippers, she is waking up Dorothy's prostitute. What the witch is actually saying to Dorothy is, at any given time, you can get off that difficult road if you will sell those shoes. That's the bargain. Every time you are given a new charism or a clearer sense of self, the prostitute will test you to see if you're willing to sell your new spiritual power for material gain of some sort. It's as though you've won the lottery and somebody calls you up and asks if you'd like to invest in some swampland in Florida. That's funny. That's also where the saboteur comes in. Are you going to sabotage your personal growth for a little comfort, or will your inner saboteur alert you to danger in time to keep you on the yellow brick road? The next person Dorothy meets is the Scarecrow, who complains that he doesn't have a brain. Her interaction with the Scarecrow represents a dialogue with her own intelligence, in which for the first time she has to assess her intellectual reality. As an extension of her inner self, the Scarecrow will also go to Oz to get a brain, and so they set off together. Down the road, they meet the Tin Man, who is rusted into immobility and who, once lubricated, complains that he needs a heart. In symbolic terms, Dorothy also needs to awaken the sense of love and compassion that lies within. Both the Scarecrow and the Tin Man were dormant until Dorothy awakened them, and herself, to the need to go on the hero's journey to gain what they're essentially lacking. Along the way, they meet the Cowardly Lion, who is immobilized by fear. The lion lacks courage, which is a function of self-esteem and is related to will and choice. On their journey to Oz, Dorothy encounters many difficulties and detours, each of which arouses the victim archetypes in her. She can act like a victim and give in, or she can call on her companions and guides for help, which she does on several occasions. The most dangerous obstacle is the field of poppies, which causes her to fall into a deep sleep along with the lion and Toto. Certain realities are too much for us to handle on a conscious level, and so we must process them in an unconscious state, say in dreams or a deep sleep. When Jesus took his 12 apostles to the Garden of Gethsemane and asked them to stay awake and watch with him, for example, they couldn't do it. It's as though the force field of anguish that he was giving off was too much for them to bear, and they fell into unconsciousness. You may notice yourself that if you're reading a book or attending a lecture that deals with spiritually or psychologically heavy material, you may fall asleep, perhaps aided by a boring lecturer. A similar phenomenon also occurs during healing services when certain people go down under the power, meaning that they lapse into momentary unconsciousness so that healing can take place on a deeper level. Some old wounds that are being healed may be too traumatic to be addressed consciously. Dorothy's transition from childhood to adulthood, from orphan child to hero, is going to require not only grace, but also a healing of her past, which is accomplished in part in the unconscious state. Dorothy and her companions eventually arrive at Oz and go before the wizard. As any good spiritual master would do, he immediately puts them to the test, saying that he won't help them unless they bring back the broom of the Wicked Witch. The paradox here is that you will always have a test to invoke grace, and you need grace to pass the test. You can't just suddenly become courageous. You have to act out of courage to know you have courage. When they go to the Wicked Witch's dark castle to get the broom, Dorothy is captured, just as during our own spiritual development, even if we get past our desires, we always get captured in some way by our fears, and we feel isolated and abandoned. The prison in the dark castle is reminiscent of the dark forest through which Dorothy passed on her way to Oz in search of integration. The dark forest is a time-honored image of the dangers of the search for self. In Dante's Divine Comedy, another allegorical account of a spiritual journey from the lower regions through purgatory to paradise, the hero went through the dark wood of error. When stuck in a dark wood or prison, we need to look to the saboteur, who reminds us that we must keep the faith and not give in to our fears. But at each stage of her journey, Dorothy is able to call on the lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow to rescue her. In effect, she is calling on her own courage, will, and heart, which she is in the process of unifying. As her three companions are trying to rescue Dorothy, the witch shows up and sets fire to the Scarecrow, beginning her attack on the intellectual level, as often happens when we try to follow a spiritual path. The mind says, this is ridiculous. People couldn't possibly get enlightened by sitting on a cushion and closing their eyes. But Dorothy picks up a bucket of water, representing her unconscious, and throws it on the witch, thereby making herself conscious. As the water hits the witch, she chides Dorothy for doing the one thing that could free her of the witch's power, and then she melts away. As soon as Dorothy calls on her unconscious, the whole world that had once scared her dissolves, and she sees only safety. Dorothy and her companions return to Oz, feeling totally successful. They bring the broom to the wizard, only to be told that it's not enough. Toto, the guardian, will not accept their rejection and says, in effect, "This is wrong. You have to see that it's fraudulent. I'm going to show you." The guardian goes over and pulls the curtain hiding the role-playing wizard, showing Dorothy that she does not need to rely on a shadow guru to do her spiritual work for her. In fact, if you project your own needs and fantasies onto a guru, you may end up getting burned. There's a lot of those out there today. A lot of people that are very, very well known on social media platforms like this. And I often wonder if people don't rely on that too much and forget that, yes, it's always nice to have somewhere to go for answers and to learn more, but you also have to have a healthy boundary of remembering where to look for all of what you need, which is inside, and remembering that no one person outside of you is ever going to solve your issues or ever going to be able to answer those questions that only you can answer, right? All right. Exposed, the wizard is forced to make good on his promises and help Dorothy find her way home from Oz. Although Oz represents the achievement of spiritual power and independence, it's essentially meaningless unless she can bring back home what she has learned and apply it to her everyday life. Spiritual insight is not an end in itself, but a means to transform our life on Earth from mere survival and dominance into compassion and service to others. Dorothy is now confronted with yet another test, this one regarding false power. Even though the wizard has been less than forthcoming on his promises, Dorothy is planning to accept his guidance and accompany him in his hot air balloon. Note the ironic choice of vehicle. But Toto, following his nature by pursuing a squirrel, jumps out of the basket as if to say, "Let's get out of here." Dorothy has the good sense not to want to be separated from her guardian, and she runs out after Toto, allowing the wizard to leave without her. Having made one good choice, Dorothy is rewarded by the appearance of her other guardian, Glinda, the Good Witch of the North. Glinda reminds Dorothy that she has had the power to return home all along, only she didn't know it. The ruby slippers, which have not left her feet since she first put them on, are all she needs. Her words are reminiscent of the Buddhist teaching that we are already perfect Buddhas, we just don't realize it. And so we act like unenlightened children. If we truly knew we possessed Buddha's nature, or Christ, I should say Buddha nature, because Buddha is basically just means enlightenment. So Buddha nature, or Christ consciousness, or God realization, we would be home free. Dorothy clicks her heels together as instructed and chants the mantra her angel guardian gives her. There's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home. She actually says it in 3, which is quite, I think, symbolic also, because 3 is sort of that magic number in the spiritual realm. Numbers have a lot of meaning behind them and symbolism. So she does say it 3 times. The author only writes it twice, but she says it 3 times to get back home while she clicks her heels. In L. Frank Baum's original text, the exchange is even clearer than in the film version. So here's what he says, or what is said in the book. "Your silver shoes will carry you over the desert," replied Glinda. "If you had known their power, you could have gone back to your Auntie M the very first day you came to this country." "But then I should not have had my wonderful brains," cried the Scarecrow. "I might have passed my whole life in the farmer's cornfield." "And I should not have my lovely heart," said the Tin Man. "I might have stood and rusted in the forest till the end of the world." "And I should have lived a coward forever," declared the Lion, "and no beast in all the forest would have had a good word to say to me." "This is all true," said Dorothy, "and I am glad I was of use to these good friends. But now that each of them has had what he most desired, and each is happy in having a kingdom to rule besides, I think I should like to go back to Kansas." "The silver shoes," said the Good Witch, "have wonderful powers, and one of the most curious things about them is that they can carry you to any place in the world in 3 steps, and each step will be made in the wink of an eye. All you have to do is knock the heels together 3 times and command the shoes to carry you wherever you wish to go." Dorothy has completed her hero's journey, come to terms with her 4 survival archetypes, and with courage consolidated her mind, heart, and will. Her most challenging adversary, the Wicked Witch, has proved to be the one who did the most to expand her soul. And so Dorothy wakes up safe in her bed, right back in Kansas, with the same Auntie Em and Uncle Henry, with whom she had been so disenchanted with at the beginning of the story. Only now she embraces them wholeheartedly. Dorothy appears to be in the same physical reality, but is not. She is fully transformed. She emerges not as a frightened little orphan child, but as an intelligent, fully awakened heart consciousness in the same body. She has returned whole from chaos and her journey. Our work has essentially the same goal. By learning to recognize the archetypal patterns at work within your psyche, which I will teach you in Chapter 5, you can begin to view your life symbolically, rather than taking every interaction personally and viewing it only on the physical plane. Like the lion, you need courage to look at the victim archetype within you and learn to make it into your ally. You need the heart that the Tin Man sought so that you can love yourself when you see the prostitute at work in your psyche, and to turn it to your advantage. And the intellect that the Scarecrow prized so highly can work with your saboteur to recognize the warning signs that you are about to do yourself in. When you tie those together, you can, like Dorothy, use your will to transform the child within, whether abandoned, wounded, or dependent, into an empowered being, capable of directing your own life with passion and skill. For then you have the elements of the soul, the eternal life, and you are on your way to discovering your spiritual identity. That was a lovely story to end on. I was a little bit worried about leaving one section on its own, but it was long enough, and I think a really great way to round out this chapter. I'm going to have to go back and watch The Wizard of Oz because I don't know if that was the intent when the author wrote it, but my goodness, was he ahead of his time if it was. And if not, you couldn't find a better example to point out exactly what she's been talking about this entire time. She's a genius for that, if that's not really the deeper meaning of the book and the movie. All right, so in Chapter 5, there's only 7 sections in Chapter 5. It is a bit shorter. It is titled Identifying Your Archetypal Patterns. So we'll start out with an intro. Then there's a section titled Where to Begin. Interview with an Archetype, which is a bit longer of a section. Letters to your Archetype. Warrior on Demand, shorter section. No, longer, I lied. Asking the questions. And this one I think I will read all on its own because we have historical questions, personal questions. This is where I think our notebook and pen is going to come in. Energy and intuitive questions, spiritual questions. Then we have a story here called One Student's Choice. And I think that's the end of it. Yeah, that's the end of Chapter 5. I'm really excited to get to Chapter 5 and really dig into the meat of this book. So far, I feel like we've had an appetizer, and now we're going to get into the actual meat of this book, where more in-depth learning is going to begin. So anyways, we'll stop right there, and in the next video, we will start on Chapter 5. So thank you so much for joining me. I love you all very much. I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm honored to read these to you. I love to do it. And until next time, as always, take care of yourself. Take care of those around you. Stay in gratitude. Stay safe. Stay in a place of peace. And until next time, yeah, I just love you all, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.